Hello and welcome back to the Ash and Stone channel. My name is Chris. North Star were kind enough to send out a preview of their new Oathmark Elf Heavy Infantry, and so I'm going to show you some of the new models and how I'm going about painting them. If you've followed any of the North Star social media accounts, you will have no doubt seen images of the frame, which will allow you to make line breakers and warriors. So with them assembled, sans shields, as it's much easier to paint things without a shield in the way, I give the models an undercoat of black to get us started. This guy is virtually straight off the frame. I did do a little bit of conversion, where I cut off his left hand and repositioned it to hold the sword, and I trimmed down the head of his axe. Vallejo Air Steel is used as a base colour for all of the areas of metal, and there is a lot of metal on these guys. They are very well armoured. I find the Model E metallics go on very smoothly with a brush, and it gives you great coverage straight out of the bottle. Most of the metal will be getting touched up later on, so it need not be perfect, but you do want good coverage on the mail and in the recesses on the breastplate and helm. From there, the trousers are given a coat of Vallejo US Grey, as is tradition. It's just a nice neutral colour that helps to push the eye towards more exciting areas of the miniature. The metallic areas and the trousers are then given a wash using army painted dark tone. You don't have to worry too much about doing the large flat areas of plate like the vambraces, greaves or backplate. Just make sure that all the recessed details and edges are hit. That's what will make the details pop and the edges well defined. Although in saying that, sometimes it's just as easy to hit everything, just like I've done here. The wash is given a couple of minutes to dry, and then out comes the Vallejo basic skin tone, which is used to base coat all of the areas of skin, so the face and the hands. It's not the end of the world, but I try to avoid getting any skin tone on the metallic areas, and I leave a little black line around the face inside of the helmet to sharply define the transition from steel to skin. This does require a couple of coats over the black undercoat. Army Painter Flesh Wash is then washed over the skin to shade the recesses and define the features. When that is dried, I use a little black to pick out the eyes. A steady hand and a horizontal line serve well here. And then white is used to pick out the whites of the eyes and the teeth. The eyes requiring a steady hand, plenty of practice, and a couple of small vertical lines on either side of the black one. Entirely unnecessary, but they do add life to the miniature. I'm going to interrupt things quickly to say a big thank you to those supporting on Patreon. It really does make a world of difference. And a big thank you to the team at North Star for supplying the pre-release figures. Then I will go back through with the light skin tone to hit the high points like the nose, cheeks, upper lip and chin, as well as highlighting the hands, leaving the darker wash in the recesses. If you do the eyes before the skin highlights, it gives you the option to tidy up any errant brush marks without having to get the paint out again, and it doesn't feel so bad if things go wrong, which they often do. When doing the hands, I try to hit the fingers and flat surfaces of the hand, leaving the shade in the recesses and as a darker line where the skin butts up against other items like weapons and armour. With the skin done, it's time to paint the boots, and out comes the old reliable Vallejo chocolate brown. This is applied over the boots in the usual fashion, where a little patchiness or unevenness in the finish is absolutely fine and just adds to the character of the item. That's followed up with Vallejo Flat Earth, which is used to apply patches of wear to the boots. It gets applied somewhat haphazardly, it's not a highlight in the traditional sense, and it's focused on areas like the toes, the heel, and the outside face of the boot, which would rub and wear in use. Because I'm painting elves, I don't want their equipment to be excessively worn. Yeah, it's probably ancient, but it's also been really well looked after. So the next step is Army Painter Strong Tone, which is applied liberally to blend the two browns together and give us our shading. Vallejo Prussian Blue is used to base the trim of the male hauberk. I make sure to get the top and sides of the trim without painting the male, so that we'll get a nice dark border around the highlight to come. With the male showing above the breastplate, I chose to paint the figure's neck with this as well, painting in the trim at the top of a male collar, and further enhancing the armoured look by covering up the exposed flesh there. This gets highlighted with Vallejo Light Sea Blue, leaving the Prussian blue around the edges and in the recesses. Where the Prussian blue can fade into the background a little, the light sea blue really pops and grabs your attention. I use Vallejo Turquoise as a base for the rest of the leather. The belt, pouch, dagger sheath and sword scabbard. And this is highlighted with Vallejo Blue Green, leaving the turquoise in the recesses as usual. The reason I've chosen to use all these blues, teals, greys and whites is to really help and indicate a connection to the sea. You can't paint a miniature without Iraqi sand, and so I use it to paint the axe haft and the handle of the dagger, doing a couple of coats to ensure I've got a nice even finish. I want to make the spaulders or ailets, depending on how you interpret those, a little more special, so I start with a couple of coats of Vallejo Brass, mainly to build up the colour around the edges of the flower motif. A wash of Army Painter Soft Tone is then applied all over the dagger handle to shade and darken the wood, around the head of the axe, and where the haft has been gripped to help define the transition between colours there. And also over the spaulders or ailets to add a bit of shading around the flower motif and on the underside of the brass plates. While I wait for that to dry, I give the feather a good base coat of Vallejo Sky Grey, and when the wash on the shoulders has dried, I pick out the petals of the flower design. White is used to highlight the feather in two coats, leaving the sky grey in the recesses, and it's used to pick out the individual petals of the flower motif, leaving a little sky grey in the gaps between each petal. With the flat surfaces of the paintwork done, the whole model is given a spray of Tamiya Flat Clear to both protect the paint job so far and to remove any unwanted shine. Though it's hard to tell on camera, I also tend to find that with the shine gone, it really makes the colours come alive. But now is the time to revisit the shiny surfaces, starting with the steel. I use Vallejo Steel once more to paint the head of the axe and the areas of plate armour, making sure to leave the flat and darker steel in the recesses, defining those details. I also give the mail a very light overbrush to pick out some of the higher links, but leaving most of it dark and flat. I find that this gives a really good contrast between the plate and the mail, but it still gives the mail a bit of a shine. When I'm done with the steel, the brass comes out again, and I hit the design on the front of the breastplate, the trim on the front of the helmet, revisit the edges of the spaulders or ailets, pick out the centre of the flower, and the plume holder. The areas that haven't been painted brass yet require 2 coats to get an even finish. Soft tone is used to shade the design on the breastplate and to pick out the rivet in the centre of the helmet trim, if it's got one. Otherwise I just put a little blob of wash there to simulate it. A little steel is mixed into the brass to give me a highlight colour, which I use to pick out the high points and edges of the brass just to elevate things a little. Citadel Spiritstone Red is blobbed onto the plume holder as a gem or a bit of enamelling to jazz things up a touch. And when that dries, we're on to basing. I do my usual trick, a bit of grout mixed with soil is glued on. The rim is painted black, Static grass is added with my applicator, and I stick on a couple of tufts and some fine turf. Shields are painted for those models that need them. Because I clearly hate myself, all of my elf shields are hand painted, and if you want to see how I go about that, I have a dedicated video linked in all the usual places. When they are done, these shields are super glued to the appropriate models. And there we go! These guys are going to look great as a full unit. Along with the plastic kit, there is of course the metals as well, and there are a good number of really characterful models there. I'm especially fond of the Battle Lord with the eye patch and greatsword, the champion with the club over his shoulder, the priest or cleric, who's quite different from the usual spellcasters you see, and the she-elf, who strikes me as some sort of explorer looking off towards new horizons. They would make a very cool team of heroes actually. Hope this video has been helpful, hopefully it's got your painting juices flowing, and we will see you next time. Cheers!